At Life Leadership Lessons, we are prescribing truth as cure. So if you look at the model here, we're saying, remember, your truth is not always the truth. So let's talk about this because this is important. So what we know is we all perceive truth differently. I could say, I'm holding a pen, and we might agree on that I'm holding a pen. That's a real easy one. But on the other hand, maybe somebody would walk in this room and talk to us and for a little bit and leave, and I would say, boy, that person seemed really angry. And you might say, well, no, I didn't perceive that they were angry at all. And now we start talking about, why did I perceive that person as angry and you didn't? I mean, it's my truth that that person was angry, and it's your truth that that person was not. And so what we know is we perceive things differently, and then we can talk about all the reasons why we perceive it differently. Maybe that person reminded me of my father, and my father was very angry. So what we know is our past experiences, things that our education, all types of different reasons why we would perceive something differently than somebody else. And so I always think of the example of, let's say there's a car accident in the middle of an intersection, and there's a person standing on each corner of that intersection and witness this accident. And the police show up and separate these witnesses right away. They want to get clean testimonies from each person on what they saw. And let's just say that each one of these four people were absolutely committed to being truthful. And they each filled out a report that was truthful. They, to the best of their abilities, they said, here is my truth. And they filled out those reports. Now, we know you could put those four reports together and they would probably all look different to some degree. And then we can talk about why they look different. I mean, some of it might have been just the physical limitations. Somebody saw it from a different angle. But again, I go back, maybe somebody said, oh my gosh, the person in the white car was absolutely at fault. And maybe that has to do with maybe somewhere in their past they got rear-ended by a white car. And then on an unconscious level, they don't even realize there's always already a bias in there in regards to about what they saw because of their past. So we have to remember, we can share, it's critical, as we've said over and over at Life Leadership Lessons, you have to share your truths. But when you do, you have to also know it's not always going to be the truth. And that means something as clear as, when I say the truth, something as clear as I'm holding this pen. We would both agree on that that's the truth. But not everything is that easy. So we have to remember, people might see things a different way. And if we can remember that and then use our truth dialoguing guidelines to seek to understand why that other person sees the situation differently. Normally what happens is we go into communication, and when I realize that your truth is different than my truth, I then set out to convince you that you are wrong and I am right. And we go into a communication with the goal of being right instead of the goal to understand each other. This is critical to communication, that we seek to understand each other. Let me use another example. I'm standing at the bus stop, and a gentleman's standing next to me, and a bus goes by, and that bus backfires. And the gentleman standing next to me falls on the ground. And I'm going, what's going on? And maybe my first thought is, oh, well, just, another guy on drugs. And because that makes no sense. And I'm already judging this person and saying this person must be a drug addict or whatever it might be. And now, because the bus just backfired. And then this gentleman gets on his feet and I say, what's your problem? And this gentleman says, well, I just got back from Iraq and I'm just a mess. And so now I realize that I judge this person, thought, oh, they must just be on drugs. Reality, this person was out defending our country and has come back shell-shocked from what he's been through. And to me, what was just a bus backfiring, to him was life-threatening. Now, talk about two different perspectives on something. But in that situation, you can understand why that person had such a different perspective on it. And that's what we got to be willing to do in day-to-day communication. Seek to understand, know that your truth isn't always the truth, and be willing to seek to understand each other to understand why a person sees the situation differently. And in the end, after you understand, let's go back to that example I just used. after talking to that gentleman that was standing next to me that fell on the ground, oh, I fully understood why he did what he did. And I felt bad. I judged him so quickly. But I fully understood. But to me, that was still just a bus backfiring. To him, it wasn't. And so we have to remember our truth is not always the truth, and then be willing to care enough to seek to understand why a person's truth is different than ours.